He slapped me, right there, in front of his whole family, with the Thanksgiving turkey sitting on the table and the cranberry sauce still glistening in the bowl. The sound cracked louder than the forks on china, louder than the fake little laughs they'd been throwing my way all night, and before I could even catch my breath, my 9-year-old daughter looked him dead in the eye and said, "It's over, Dad." Grandpa already knows everything. If you're watching, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets a lot more interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But let me back up and tell you about what I went through and how the ending changed everything. Now let me back up, because moments like that don't just fall from the sky. They build, brick by brick, bruise by bruise, until the whole damn house shakes. And when it comes crashing down, people like John, my husband, the golden boy of his family, suddenly look very small. That morning started like every Thanksgiving I'd hosted since we got married. I was in the kitchen before the sun even thought about coming up, basting a turkey that weighed more than my daughter, setting out casseroles, trying to time the pies just right, and all the while, I was pulling my sleeves down a little lower than usual, making sure the concealer was thick enough to hide the fading yellow marks on my arm. It's funny how a person can become an expert in makeup they never wanted to wear. Lily, my daughter, she notices everything. She's got these wide eyes that don't miss a damn thing, no matter how much I try to smile and say, "It's fine, honey." Mom's just tired. That morning, she perched herself on the counter with a piece of toast, swinging her legs like any 9-year-old would. But she didn't chatter like the other kids her age. No, she was quiet, studying me like she always did. And when John walked into the kitchen, sharp as ever in his button-down shirt, she stiffened. "Morning," he said, all sugar on the outside. That's how he fooled most people, especially his mother. To Evelyn, he was still the perfect son, the man who could do no wrong. But I knew that voice. That voice meant he was measuring, deciding if today would be a good day or a bad one. Lily slid off the counter, toast still in hand, and muttered something about feeding the dog. She hates being around when he gets that look in his eyes. I hated it too, but unlike me, she didn't flinch. You'd think after all these years I would have left. And I hear that in my head every time I tell this story. Why didn't you just go, Sarah? But life doesn't work in neat little answers. I had bills. I had a kid. I had this crushing hope that maybe, just maybe, if I cooked enough meals, kept the house spotless, played the part of the good wife, the man I married would come back, the one who used to buy me flowers for no reason, who whispered about our dreams at night. But that man was gone. So instead, I stirred gravy and tried not to think about the throbbing in my wrist. By the time guests started arriving, the house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey. John's family poured in, loud and judgmental as ever. His sisters walked through like queens, dropping comments about how I looked tired, how the curtains didn't match the season, how, "At least the turkey smells decent this year." Evelyn kissed me on the cheek with her lips pinched tight, like the effort alone was a sacrifice. I smiled. I served drinks. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. That's what you do in a house like that. You play your part. But Lily, she was different that day. She wasn't just watching anymore. She had this quiet confidence, this calm that made me nervous. She sat at the kids' table but leaned forward every time someone raised their voice. And when John snapped his fingers at me to bring more rolls, I swear I saw her jaw tighten like steel. Hours passed, dishes piled up, and the tension climbed until it could have sliced through the mashed potatoes. And then it happened. Evelyn made some cutting remark about how a real wife would have handled the pie crust better. I don't even remember what she said exactly. I just remember something in me cracked. I set down the dish I was holding and, for the first time in years, I spoke up. Maybe a real family wouldn't make a woman feel like trash in her own kitchen. The room went silent, Forks froze halfway to mouths. John's eyes went wide and then narrow, like I'd just broken some sacred rule. And before I could even blink, his hand whipped across my face. The sting was hot, but the silence afterward was worse. No one moved. No one said a word. Evelyn looked down at her plate like it was suddenly fascinating. His sisters shifted uncomfortably, but not one of them stood up for me. I was alone, except for Lily. She stood, slow and steady, napkin dropping from her lap to the floor. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Because Grandpa already has everything. Every word, every video, every time you hurt Mom." My heart stopped. I looked at her, really looked at her, and in that second I understood. The whispers, the little projects she'd been working on, the way she carried herself with a secret she wouldn't share, it all clicked. John's face drained of color. He laughed, this brittle, broken sound, and said, "What are you talking about?" But Lily didn't flinch. "You'll see," she said. "Grandpa's on his way." The room erupted. His sisters demanded answers. Evelyn hissed something about making a scene. John grabbed Lily's arm, but she yanked it back with more strength than I'd ever seen in her small frame. And in that chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Because for the first time, the secret wasn't mine to carry anymore. My 9-year-old had ripped the mask off the man everyone thought was perfect, and there was no putting it back on. I wish I could tell you I was the brave one that day, that I finally stood tall and told the whole room what life with John had really been like. But the truth is, it wasn't me. It was Lily, my little girl who refused to let her mother be broken anymore. And as the chaos swirled, I realized everything was about to change. When I tell people that my daughter saved me, they think I'm speaking in metaphors, like she gave me the strength to finally walk away. And yes, she did that. But she also saved me in the most literal, terrifying, brilliant way a 9-year-old could. Because a month before that Thanksgiving dinner, while I was still convincing myself to hang in there for the sake of family, Lily was already making plans. She came home one afternoon with a bright smile and a backpack stuffed with notebooks. "It's for school, Mom," she said. "We're doing a project on family life." I thought nothing of it at first. I even felt a little proud. My girl, curious about people, just like me when I was her age. She scribbled notes at the kitchen table while I made spaghetti, asked innocent questions like, "What makes a good family?" or "How do people show love?" But then I noticed she never asked John. Instead, she'd tilt her head, watching him the way a scientist studies a dangerous animal. And whenever he snapped, slammed a door, raised his voice, belittled me over something as small as forgetting to iron his shirt, her little hands would tighten around that notebook. One night, I walked into her room and caught her whispering into a stuffed bear. At first, I laughed. Kids play pretend, right? But when I leaned closer, I realized she'd hidden my old phone inside the bear, recording. "Lily," I whispered, my throat going dry. "What are you doing?" She didn't even look scared. She looked steady. "I'm getting proof, Mom." I froze. Proof. That word rang in my ears like a church bell. My heart dropped because it was insane. She was 9. She was supposed to be worried about homework and birthday parties, not evidence, not this. "Sweetheart, you can't—" I started, but she cut me off with a fierceness I'd never seen in her before. "You always tell me to be brave. Grandpa says the same thing. He says if someone's hurting the people you love, you don't just watch. You protect them. That's what I'm doing. I'm protecting you." I swear, I couldn't breathe. I sat on the edge of her bed, holding my face in my hands, feeling like the worst mother alive. My daughter was fighting a battle that should have been mine, but she wasn't backing down. "Mom," she said softly, crawling closer, "he can't keep doing this." You think you're hiding it from me, but I see everything. Every bruise, every time you smile when you want to cry. I know, and I'm not letting him win anymore." And just like that, I realized something brutal. The silence I thought was protecting her was killing us both. So I let her keep recording. Not because I wanted her to, but because stopping her would have been like putting out the only flame left in a dark room. The weeks that followed were unbearable. John's anger was unpredictable. Some nights he'd come home sweet as pie, bringing flowers, hugging Lily too tightly like he was proving something. Other nights, the mask slipped, the shouting, the slamming, the cutting remarks, and always, in the background, Lily's quiet little click of a button. One night, he shoved me against the counter because the chicken was too dry. Lily didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked right up, looked him square in the face, and said, "I'm recording this." I thought he'd explode, but he just laughed, cruel and sharp. "What, you think anyone's going to believe you? I'm your father. I'm the hero in this house. Everyone knows your mother's just weak." That night, I cried harder than I ever had before, not because of the pain in my back, but because my baby had to hear those words. But Lily, she only got stronger. She started organizing the files on my laptop, labeling them math homework and science project so John wouldn't snoop. And then, God help me, she emailed one of them to my father, her grandfather. I found out because Dad called me. His voice low and heavy. "Sarah," he said, "Lily reached out." My stomach dropped. "Dad, no, she didn't." "She did. And you listen to me, sweetheart. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I've seen enough. I'm handling it." For the first time in years, my father's military voice, the one that used to scare me as a kid, was a comfort. He wasn't just talking like a dad. He was talking like a man with power, with connections, with a plan. That night, I hugged Lily tighter than ever. "You shouldn't have done that," I whispered, my tears wetting her hair. But she pulled back and said something that burned into my soul. "If I waited for you to be ready, Mom, we'd never be free." Those words haunted me. She was right. I'd been surviving, not living, and she refused to let me drag her into that cycle. The closer Thanksgiving came, the more restless John grew. He sensed something was off, like an animal sniffing danger. He'd pace the house, accuse me of being distant, demand to know why Lily was always sneaking around. I lived with my heart in my throat, terrified he'd find the recordings before Dad could act. The night before Thanksgiving, John exploded over something trivial, the tablecloth of all things. He grabbed it, yanked it so hard that the candlesticks toppled and shattered on the floor. Lily rushed between us before he could touch me again. "Stop it," she shouted, her tiny body shaking, but her voice unwavering. "You don't scare me anymore. Tomorrow, everyone's going to know." He sneered, leaning down close. "You think your little games matter? You're a child. I'm the man in this house. Nobody's taking me down." But Lily didn't back away. She whispered so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "You already lost." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the clock, wondering what would happen tomorrow. Would Dad really come? Would the truth finally spill out? Or would John crush us before we had a chance? I wanted to run, to pack a bag and disappear into the night. But when I looked at Lily, curled up with that stuffed bear hiding the phone, I knew we had to stay. Because she wasn't just a kid anymore. She was the one holding all the pieces. And so, the next day, when John raised his hand at the table and the whole room went silent, Lily was ready. She wasn't scared. She wasn't even angry. She was calm, steady, unshakable. And when she said Grandpa already knew, I realized the storm we'd been bracing for was about to break. The room after Lily's words felt like the world stopped breathing. Forks clinked against plates, glasses trembled in people's hands, but no one spoke. John's face went from red to pale in a heartbeat. He tried to laugh it off, this forced, brittle chuckle, but his eyes darted around the table like a trapped animal. "Grandpa already knows," he repeated, voice cracking just enough to betray the fear underneath. What the hell are you talking about?" Lily didn't blink. She sat straighter, napkin folded neatly beside her plate like she'd rehearsed this moment. "Every time you hit Mom, every time you screamed at her, every insult, every bruise you thought nobody noticed, I noticed, and Grandpa has all of it." The words hung heavy like smoke after a fire. Evelyn pressed a hand to her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to swallow the truth. One of John's sisters muttered, "She's lying. Kids make things up." But then Lily reached into her little purse and pulled out the phone. She set it on the table, pressed play, and John's own voice filled the dining room. "You're nothing without me, Sarah. Nothing. Don't you dare look at me like that." The recording was sharp, cold, undeniable. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the edge of the table just to stay upright. Hearing his cruelty played back like that, it was like my whole life was suddenly in surround sound, stripped of the excuses I'd been feeding myself. John lunged for the phone, but Lily snatched it back with lightning speed. "It's already sent, Dad." "You can't stop it." And right then, like the universe had been waiting for her cue, the front door slammed open. "John Hayes!" The voice boomed like thunder. Everyone jumped, and there he was, my father, General Robert Hayes, standing tall in his uniform even though he'd retired years ago. Behind him, 2 men in suits stepped inside, their briefcases snapping open with papers spilling out. For a moment, John actually shrank in his chair. This man, who had spent years towering over me, suddenly looked like a scolded child. "Dad!" John started, forcing a laugh. "This isn't—" "Shut your mouth!" General Hayes barked. The entire room went dead silent. My father's voice was like steel sharpened over decades. "I've heard enough of your lies. I've seen the proof. And tonight, everyone here is going to see who you really are." The men in suits spread the files across the dining table, right between the turkey and the stuffing. Photographs, transcripts, audio recordings. It was all there, neatly organized, undeniable. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth. One of John's sisters pushed back from the table, shaking her head. "No, this can't be true." But it was. John stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "This is ridiculous." "She's just a kid. You're all being manipulated. Sarah's been filling her head with lies." "Enough," my father said, slamming a hand on the table. The dishes rattled. "I raised you better than this, Sarah." "But I sure as hell didn't raise my granddaughter to be afraid of men like you. She's braver than you'll ever be." My throat closed up. Tears blurred my vision. For so long I'd felt like no one believed me, like my pain was invisible. And now, here was my father, standing in the wreckage of our Thanksgiving dinner, putting it all into words. John tried again, voice breaking. "You think you can take my family away from me? You think you can ruin me?" "You ruined yourself," Lily said softly, her small voice cutting sharper than any shout. That was the moment I saw it. The crack in John's armor finally splitting wide open, his fists clenched, his chest heaved, but there was no power left. He looked around the room, begging silently for someone, anyone, to take his side. But no one did, not even Evelyn. The men in suits stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, you've been served," one said, handing him a thick envelope. "Restraining order." Custody proceedings. Criminal charges pending John's face drained completely, his lips trembling. "You can't. This is my house." "No," my father corrected, his voice steady, calm. "This was your house. Starting tonight, it's the place where your lies died." John staggered back, his bravado crumbling. He tried to grab at the papers, tried to rip them, but one of the men stopped him with a firm hand. The sight of him, my once mighty husband, reduced to a cornered man clutching shredded napkins like they could save him, It almost didn't feel real. And then Evelyn spoke. "John." Her voice was trembling, soft in a way I'd never heard. "You did this?" He spun on her, desperate. "Mom, you know me. I would never." But the recording still played on the phone. His voice again, cutting through the room. "If you leave me, I'll make sure you regret it every day of your life." Evelyn's face collapsed. She covered her mouth, tears spilling over. His sisters looked away, unable to meet his eyes. In that instant, the fortress of loyalty he'd always hidden behind was gone. And me? I finally stood. My hands were still shaking, but my voice was steady. "You wanted me small. You wanted me silent. But look at me now, John. Look at us. We're not afraid of you anymore." Lily slipped her hand into mine, her little fingers warm and strong. "We're free now, Mom," she whispered. John opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He just stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies, by the people who finally saw the monster he really was. And for the first time, I felt taller than him. The men escorted him out, his protests growing weaker with every step. The door slammed behind them, leaving nothing but silence and the smell of turkey gone cold. My father walked around the table, placed a firm hand on my shoulder, and looked me in the eye. "It's over, Sarah," he said softly. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." I broke then. Years of holding it in, of painting on smiles and hiding bruises, poured out of me in sobs I couldn't control. And Lily held me, whispering, "It's okay, Mom." It's okay. That night I realized the truth. Monsters don't live under the bed. They sit at your dinner table, smiling in family photos, pretending to be perfect. And sometimes it takes a child, braver than all of us, to finally drag them into the light. The night John was taken away, the house felt hollow. Not quiet, hollow, like the walls themselves were breathing differently, no longer holding their breath for the next outburst. I remember sitting at the table after everyone had gone, staring at the dishes gone cold, the turkey carved but untouched. It felt surreal, like waking up after a nightmare and not quite believing the monster was gone. Lily climbed into my lap, even though she was getting too big for it. She pressed her head against my chest and whispered, "We did it, Mom." He can't hurt us anymore. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel nothing but relief. But in the back of my mind, there was this gnawing whisper. What if it's not really over? What if he comes back? Years of fear don't vanish in a single night. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, court dates, and whispers from neighbors who finally realized the picture-perfect family next door wasn't so perfect. My father was there every step, firm and steady, like a wall I could lean on. But it was Lily who amazed me the most. She didn't crumble under the chaos. If anything, she bloomed. When the judge granted the restraining order and began the custody process, John erupted in court, shouting that it was all a conspiracy. But the evidence, the recordings, the transcripts, the photos, was undeniable. For once, the truth was louder than his temper. He was let out in handcuffs, spitting threats that no longer carried weight. I'll never forget the day the sentence came down, 5 years. Not nearly enough for what he did to us, but enough to breathe again. Enough to know the locks on my doors didn't need to hold back a monster anymore. 6 months later, I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, a balcony with peeling paint, a kitchen barely big enough for a stove and fridge. But it was ours. Ours. No walking on eggshells, no hiding bruises, no pretending. The first night there, I cooked spaghetti. Nothing special, just noodles and jarred sauce. But when I set the plates down, Lily looked at me with this glowing smile. "It tastes better here," she said, twirling her fork, "because it's safe." I cried into my plate that night. Happy tears, scared tears, everything in between. I went back to work as a nurse full-time. It wasn't easy. I'd taken years off, and I felt rusty, unsure if I still had it in me. But with every shift, every patient I helped, I remembered who I was before John, strong, capable, worth something. The paycheck wasn't huge, but it was mine, earned by my own 2 hands. Lily flourished too. She joined a debate club at school, and I swear, watching her stand on that stage, fearless and articulate, I saw the same little girl who'd stared down her father at Thanksgiving. Only now, she was using that fire to argue about school policies and community projects. People started calling her a leader. I just called her my miracle. Of course, the scars didn't vanish. Some nights I'd still wake up sweating, convinced I heard John's footsteps in the hall. Sometimes Lily would flinch at sudden loud noises, her calm mask slipping just enough to reveal the fear underneath. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, jagged, unpredictable. But we had each other, and that was enough. 3 years later, I watched Lily, 12 years old now, sit across from a friend at our kitchen table. The friend was crying, her voice trembling as she confessed that her own father yelled all the time, that she felt scared in her own home. I wanted to step in to comfort her, but I stopped at the doorway because Lily leaned forward, her voice steady and warm. Listen, you don't have to stay quiet. People will tell you to, but you don't. You can be brave. I know because I did it, and if you need help, I'll be there. Her friend's eyes widened, and in that moment, I saw it. Lily had become more than just a survivor. She was a protector, a mentor. She'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into a gift she could give others. Later that night, I asked her, "Does it ever feel heavy, carrying all that?" She thought for a moment, then shrugged in that wise beyond her years way. "Sometimes. But Grandpa says justice isn't light. It's supposed to be heavy. That's how you know it matters." I couldn't argue with that. Every once in a while, I get letters from John, from prison. They're full of excuses, manipulations, half apologies twisted into blame. I don't respond. I don't even let Lily see them. I burn them in the sink, watch the paper curl into ash, and remind myself that his words don't hold power anymore. One letter, though, stuck with me. He wrote, "I never thought you'd fight back. I never thought you had it in you." He was right. I didn't fight back, not at first, but Lily did. And because she did, I learned how. Now, when I walk into our little apartment after a long shift and see her bent over homework or laughing on the phone with friends, I feel this wave of gratitude so fierce it nearly knocks me down. We're free. We're alive. We're stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to us. People sometimes ask me if I regret staying as long as I did, if I regret not leaving sooner, and God, yes, I do. But I also know this. My daughter carries a fire inside her that might never have been lit if she hadn't seen the truth so young. She turned our pain into power, our silence into proof, our fear into freedom. And that, to me, is the greatest justice of all. Because in the end, this isn't a story about what John did to us. It's a story about what Lily did for us, about how a little girl, with nothing more than a phone and unshakable courage, broke the cycle, about how we learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. 3 years later, it feels strange to say this out loud. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of John, not of the shadows in the hallway, not of the weight of silence. For so long, silence ruled our lives. It kept us trapped. Now, it's just peace. Lily is 12, and when I look at her, sometimes I see the 9-year-old who stood up at that Thanksgiving table and shattered the lie we were living. Other times, I see a young woman in the making, someone who knows more about courage than I did at twice her age. One evening, I found her sitting on the balcony of our little apartment, legs tucked under her, writing in her notebook. The city hummed below us, and the air smelled faintly of rain. I asked her what she was working on. She shrugged. Just thoughts. I like remembering. It helps me understand who I am. I sat beside her, sipping my tea. "Who do you think you are?" I asked. She looked at me with those sharp, steady eyes, the same ones that once stared her father down without flinching. "I'm someone who doesn't let people stay broken. Not if I can help it." Her words hit me harder than any blow John ever gave, because she meant it. This wasn't just a phase, or a child parroting things adults said. This was her truth. At school, she'd become the girl everyone went to with their secrets. Kids whose parents fought, kids who felt invisible, kids who didn't know where else to turn. She didn't gossip, she didn't judge, she just listened. And when the time was right, she said the same words she once said to me: "You don't have to stay quiet." Sometimes I worry it's too much weight for her, that she's carrying a burden most adults can't even hold. But then I remember what my father told her: justice isn't light. That's how you know it matters. The night of her 12th birthday, she asked if we could go visit Grandpa. So we drove out to his quiet house on the edge of town. He was waiting on the porch, tall and unyielding, even with age softening his edges. "Happy birthday, soldier," he said, wrapping her in a hug that nearly swallowed her whole. They sat on the porch swing, talking in low voices, while I watched from the doorway. She told him about her friends, about the kids she'd helped. And then she asked him something that nearly stopped my heart. "Grandpa, was I wrong to do what I did? To record Dad? To expose him?" My father was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand in his massive one. "Lily, you weren't wrong. You were brave. You saw injustice, and you acted. That's what people forget. Justice isn't always loud, and it isn't always clean. Sometimes it's a little girl with a phone, refusing to let her mother be erased." Her shoulders relaxed, and she leaned into him. I could see it, the way his words poured strength back into her, the way mine never quite could. And I was grateful. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked me something I'll never forget. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever change?" The question cut deep. I wanted to lie, to tell her yes, that someday he'd realize the damage he caused and make amends, but I couldn't. Not anymore. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly, "but I know this. Whether he changes or not, it's not our job to wait for him. Our job is to live free, to live happy, to never let anyone make us small again." She nodded, eyes heavy with sleep, but I knew she understood. In the years since John's arrest, letters still trickle in from prison. I don't read them anymore. I shred them without a second thought, because they don't deserve space in our lives. They don't get to take up room where healing belongs. Instead, our days are filled with small joys: Saturday mornings making pancakes, late night talks on the balcony, spaghetti dinners where we laugh so hard sauce splatters across the table. Life isn't perfect. It never is, but it's ours, and that makes it beautiful. Sometimes people ask me if I hate John, if I want revenge, and the truth is, no. I don't waste energy hating him anymore. He already lost. He lost the family he claimed to own, the respect he demanded, the mask he wore so carefully. He lost us. The real victory isn't in his downfall. It's in our freedom. In Lily's laughter, in the fact that I can stand tall again, not as someone's possession, but as myself. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted our apartment walls gold, Lily said something that brought me to tears. "Mom," she whispered, "when I'm older, I want to help kids like me. Kids who are scared, who don't know what to do. I want them to know they're not alone." I hugged her tight, my heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. You already are, I whispered back, because she was. Every word she spoke at school, every hand she held, every quiet moment where she gave someone else hope, that was her legacy already in motion. And me? I finally found my place again, nursing full-time, helping people heal, just like I was meant to before my life got swallowed by fear. Sometimes, when I walk into hunched, eyes tired, and I tell them, softly but firmly, you're stronger than you think. I know because I was there. The story of our lives could have ended in silence. It could have ended at that table with me bowing my head, pretending the slap didn't sting, swallowing the humiliation until it ate me whole. But it didn't, because a little girl refused to let silence win. Now, when I close my eyes at night, I don't hear his voice anymore. I hear hers. Strong, steady, fearless. The same voice that saved me. And if you ask me what justice looks like, I tell you this. It looks like a child choosing truth over fear. It looks like a mother finding her way back to herself. It looks like freedom served cold at a Thanksgiving table. Our scars will always be part of us, but so will our strength. And every day, I thank God for the girl who taught me that even the smallest voice can bring down the loudest lie. Because in the end, this isn't just my story, it's hers. And it's only the beginning. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. And please, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts.